Time now to join Frank O'Callaghan for the next instalment of the series Dundalk's Radio and Television People. Part 10. After his leaving certificate, Des O'Loughlin started in GEC Dunleer, where he worked on the television chassis on the production line. He later attended the Regional Technical College to study a City and Guilds in electronics before setting up a sales, service and repair centre, Audiocom, 54 Park Street. Des remembers Jack McIntaggart coming to their house and how his interest in electronics grew from talking to him.
As part of our series of programmes, Dundalk's Radio and Television People, I think I have another gem of a guest with me in the studio tonight. His name is Des O'Loughlin, a person that all of our listeners will know. You're very welcome to the programme, and I tell you, I'm really looking forward to this interview and the stories and the crack that's going to come out of you. Talk a bit about yourself, your background before you got involved in the television business in the GEC.
Well, let me think now. I started to work in GEC, I think it was 1968, September, and I just finished my Leaving Cert, and I wanted to do television engineering and radio and technician kind of engineering. But I did a very bad Leaving Cert because in those days I did it very young, I was 16. So I took a year out and I got a job in GEC in Dunleer in 1968, and I ended up working in the television department. And at the time, when on the very first day I arrived there, and Pat Reynolds was there and Arthur Kinahan, the supervisor, and they looked at me and probably said, well, this guy hasn't a clue what he's going to be doing. But anyway, they put me on the task of what they called casing the television sets.
And do you mind me asking a technical question like that? What does casing the television sets mean?
Well, basically, it was a job whereby you took the television case with the tube and the tuner in it, and we had to physically put the chassis into the television set and then wire all the connections between the tuner and the tube, and a couple of little soldering jobs along the way. And when we were finished that, it went on then to a lady across the way from me. Her name was Bridget McMahon, and Bridget used to align the tuner with the chassis. That was her job.
Just before you go further, Des, are you telling me you were 16 years of age?
16 years of age at the time. Yeah.
What had you in your mind at that stage that said
I wanted to do electronics?
What was the motivation for that? Was it a background?
I just had a great interest in it, and I tell you who really put me onto it. A man called Jack McIntaggart, who used to work with Rory Hall. And Rory used to come up to our house with Jack to fix the television aerial and fixed the old Pi television that my mother and father bought from R.Q. O'Neill's way back. And I just loved what they were doing, and I just wanted to get involved in that.
Well, we've had a great chat with Rory, just like we're having with you. But tell me a little bit more about Jack.
Jack was a very nice gentleman. He was a great engineer. He knew all about valves and capacitors and resistors, and he knew how to fix all the television sets that were on the market at the time.
Music to your ears, Des.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And I just thought he was such a great guy, and he really kind of got me involved in what I wanted to do was electronics.
Yeah, it was a good start for you, because not every young person coming up at 16 years of age gets like a mentor, for want of a better word.
No, but he was very good. He was very good to me, and I learnt an awful lot from him over the years when I had trained and Jack was still around. You know.
And did you find the key elements of your task like natural to you? Did it come naturally to you, or did you?
No, it was a bit of a struggle all the time. You know, I was very weak at mathematics, and that was a big plus. You had to have maths to understand electricity and electronics. And when I finished in GEC, I went back to the regional college to study maths again and do City and Guilds, and eventually got into doing a course in the college for to become an electronic technician. That took 2 years of my life after that, and then I enjoyed it. Arthur was my supervisor. Beside me doing the same job was a lady called Mrs. Jukes. I never knew her Christian name, but she was always called Mrs. Jukes. Whereas the other lady across the way from me was Bridget McMahon.
Was that typical of the day? Where first
probably
names...
was. Of course, I was very young and naive at the time, and I hadn't a clue about girls or women in those days.
That's assuming not much has changed.
But anyway, there was loads of other people there too that I got to know over the years. There was Tom Lamb, there was Kevin Carey, Frank Byrne. Alan's.
We've had some great conversations in here with Frank and Tom.
Frank, yeah.
And we'll put this whole thing together. It's going to be very good in that respect, because lots of the people who work together are coming back together. We'll come back to the event that's coming up
on
soon.
Picture Test then there was two other guys. There was Seamus Leach from Drogheda, and there was another guy called Jerry Burke. They were on Final Picture Test when the cabinet left Bridget. It went up to Picture Test, and they set up the whole picture on the tube.
How's that done?
Well, to be honest with you, I wasn't sure how they did it, but they adjusted the coil on the yoke of the tube and set up the horizontal and vertical control on the chassis, and abracadabra, it worked. Yeah, it worked. Yeah.
What were the products you made up there back in that time?
Well, there was just one television at the time there. I think it was a 19-inch television. The cabinets were made in Farrell's in RD, and the chassis and the components and valves and all that were mounted in the television shop in Dunleer. I heard something before about Farrell's. Was that big business to them at the time? Or were they no, Farrell's. Oh, Farrell's.
The manufacturer of the frames.
Farrell's were making cabinets for televisions, and they were making cabinets for radiograms as well, because they made the two products in the television shop at the time.
They're still there, actually, doing a good job.
I think they're making coffins and other kind of things. Yeah.
Where do the raw materials come from, the components?
Well, now, I wasn't privy to that too much because it wasn't my forte, but I think a lot of the stuff came from the UK and Holland.
The GEC
the valves and the components all came mostly, I think, from the UK.
Tell me something, if you can remember, about the wage structure back in that period of time.
Oh, right.
What year are we talking about?
1968. I was on £8 old pounds a week.
A small fortune to a young guy.
It was a lot of money. And then we used to get 2 hours of overtime on a Tuesday and on a Thursday. And I, at the time, had to do 40 televisions. We had to do 5 televisions an hour, the case 5 televisions an hour. So an 8-hour day, that was 40 televisions. And you got an extra 4 hours overtime every week. And if you got your numbers to match up, you got an extra, I think it was £2 of a bonus. Now, there was some weeks you made it and other weeks you didn't make it.
Have you any idea, Des, just springs to my mind, what would a fella get back in that time for £8 a week? What was typically like? What was the lifestyle like? In your youth?
You could go out and drink quite cheaply. Let's put it this way. I bought a Honda 50 a couple of years later for €60. I think a television set in those days was nearly €100 by the time everybody got their mark. And an Austin Mini was something like €600. So you can see why people did not buy televisions. Everybody rented them.
Yeah.
And you had Bernie Mastervision and all the rental companies.
That's the story that's coming out, and they weren't reliable or something.
Well, a lot of the televisions weren't reliable. There was no doubt about it. Like, it was a bit of a wing and a prayer, to be honest.
I wasn't suggesting only the GEC television.
Well, I didn't. I'm not saying that they weren't good, but let's put it this way. The technology in them was pretty primitive at the time, you know. And certainly there was an awful lot of heat generated out of them, you know.
I'm going to go back a little bit to a conversation we had some time ago. You mentioned to me about residential fire on a Friday. What's the story behind
hang on
that?
a second now. There was rumours that some place had burnt down because of a TV set.
You're
now,
just setting
they
the
were only
record
rumours.
straight here,
I can't justify or say that for definite.
Yeah.
But I remember being asked to come in on a Saturday afternoon and a Sunday to help unpack all the television sets that were in the warehouse at the time and put them on soak test.
So this is factual. I don't mean the television.
Well, no,
sets.
that actually happened, yeah. But
Yeah,
no,
so-
I don't exactly know whether one of their television
No,
sets.
I'm not suggesting that.
Yeah,
What I'm
yeah.
saying is because of the fear, maybe.
The fear,
that it
yeah,
happened.
because there
You
was
say that all the televisions had to be retested.
retested and
Really?
soaked, yes, soak tested for quite a while, because I think there was a bit of a scare. I'm not 100%.
Well, how many televisions would fall into that category at the time? Like 10, 20
What do you mean? Like,
that had to be retested.
oh, there was probably 80 to 100 maybe in the
was a lot
warehouse
of
at the
work,
time. There was
yeah.
quite a bit, and they all had to be unpacked and
And what would the retesting entail?
just plugging them in. In those days, there was no plugs on the television. There was two bare wires. You know what I mean? And you put your own plug on it when you got it.
There was no plugs
we had
supplied in
things
the
called
television.
safe blocks,
Yeah.
and there was two crocodile clips, and you put the wires into the crocodile clips, and you close the lid, and then the voltage would come down into the
Come
television.
on, you're telling me you were selling televisions without a plug?
Well, there was no plugs in
Holy
those days
God,
on
yeah.
appliances. No, people had to fit their own, because an awful lot of people used to fit them into light bulb sockets,
course,
and they
yeah.
put 13 amp plug sockets. And there was no such thing as a 13 amp plug. It was all 15 amp round pin and 5 amp round pin. There was no
Different
13s.
times.
So there was no
am
fuses.
I reading
neither.
it right there? Is that the key element of the test was whether that television went on fire when you plugged it in?
Well, there was a good chance that it wouldn't, but like at the same time,
It might have done.
it
yeah.
might have done.
And
you
did
know.
any of them go on fire?
We had loads of fire extinguishers laying around anyway if it did.
Just in case.
No, I
So-
don't remember having to put one out. No,
No, of course you
definitely
didn't.
not,
No. And even if you did, you
Yeah.
wouldn't have said.
Yeah, well, anyway.
Worse than that effect. Yeah. The other thing I'd like to ask you about, Des, is back in the 1960s, somebody mentioned to me once that there was an import duty of a high percent.
Yeah.
And that was the reason why the product was made in Ireland.
Probably, and that's why most of the television sets were assembled in Ireland. You had GEC in Dunleary, and you had Bush, and you had Ferguson's, and you had Pye in Dundrum, and Philips, of course. They were all the main manufacturers of TVs, and it was to do with the high tariffs.
And was that a bit like the government saying, if you manufacture something in Ireland, it'll
Well, it's a bit like what Mr. Trump is trying to do in America at the moment, isn't
same
it?
type of thing.
It's
yeah.
trying to get industry back into the country.
Yeah.
And that's
And
what
obviously
happened.
it worked, Des, because it employed a lot of people in
It did,
GEC.
but when I left in 1969, it didn't last that much longer. I remember, I think that the plant had closed a couple of years later. You know,
I'm not suggesting for a
not
moment.
suggesting for 1 minute, no, but I just
But it
think
closed
maybe
because
the
you
government
left.
dropped the tariffs and
Yeah,
it just didn't become economic to make them anymore. But at the time, black and white was really coming to its end, and new technology had moved on, and you had colour television coming in. And
Were you involved in the colour television?
no, I wasn't.
Was
no,
GEC
no.
involved in the colour television?
They took in colour from the UK under the brand name of Sobel, I think, GEC Sobel. Maybe some of the other men that were more au fait with that could tell you that, Frank, but colour had come in. And it was new technology. There was probably very few valves in the chassis. It was all done with transistors and
So technology
had moved on, yeah. Whereas the chassis that we were using in GEC at the time was pretty primitive compared to what would have been available later
Yeah,
on.
but appropriate to the day
It
and
worked.
appropriate to
It
needs.
worked, yeah,
Got
at the time,
televisions
yeah,
into
yeah,
people's
yeah,
homes and
yeah,
stuff like that.
yeah.
What other people can you remember who might have worked in the GEC from Dundalk area?
Dundalk, Pat Crilly would have been the man that used to drive me up with two other lads in his white Ford Cortina every morning.
Is that how it worked?
Yeah, I used to
Sharing.
pay, I think, Pat a couple of bob every week, 10 bob, I think it was. I couldn't swear to that, but it was probably around 10
That
bob
was a
to,
good
to
percentage.
bring me up.
That
Yeah,
was a good percentage of your
yeah.
rate.
Well, it was
pounds.
either that or get the bus, and it was an awful lot cheaper for me to pay Pat. but I always remember there was one morning we got a puncture. And in those days, if you were late coming into work by any more than 20 minutes, you were told to get your card by the personnel manager who used to stand at the front gate at the time. And his name It would have been Mr. Martin Naughton at the time. He was the personnel manager.
So are you saying that if you turn up late?
Yeah, we were
stand at the front door.
Yeah, we were sent down to the television shop and told to get our card and clock out and come back up and handed it to him. And we were docked a day's pay.
So you didn't actually get into the factory?
Well, at 11 o'clock I got a phone call from a certain individual who pleaded with me to come back into production because
That's after being sent home, isn't it?
after being sent home, because the lady that was beside me, Mrs. Jukes, was off sick and there was no television production whatsoever that day because I was sent home.
All of a sudden, Des, we needed you on the premises.
Yeah, well, that was it.
Yeah.
And I was promised 2 hours overtime that night. And
did you go back up?
Full bonus, I think. I did, of course. I went back up.
Yeah.
Of course I did, yeah. I
Good
got
man,
me full
Des.
day's
Yeah.
pay. At least it was 30 or 40 television sets produced that day.
Absolutely
Whereas if
right,
I hadn't
yeah,
turned
yeah.
up, there was going to be none. Yeah.
Overall, did you enjoy your time at GEC?
I did. I learned it certainly it opened my eyes as to what the whole world was really all about. You know, it was tough going. You had to be in at 8 o'clock in the morning. You got clocked out at 5, and you went home and you got I think it was a half an hour for your lunch and then 2 15-minute breaks.
And listen, did you find that people? I mean this in the nicest sense possible. Did people actually work, or were they?
We did work because I'll tell you, my supervisor Arthur used to stand behind me, not too far away, and used to keep an eye that we weren't chatting.
Glad you said that.
That's what you weren't allowed to talk when you were working. You know,
I'm glad you said that because he's not too far away as we speak. He's probably listening to this. Yeah. What do you mean you weren't allowed to talk?
Well, we weren't really meant to talk. You were meant to work, and you were being paid to work, not talk. You know, so
was that degree of control? Yeah,
it was. Well, it was. That was the way it was. You know, I just. As I said, I learned a lot in those days.
What's your best memories of your time at work?
Probably the day I was leaving. Mr. Naughton sent for me up above in the, and it came over the tannoy with Mr. Des O'Loughlin, please go up to personnel. Mr. Naughton wants to talk to you. So I walked in anyway. I sat down. He said, "Oh God, Mr. O'Loughlin, I see you're leaving us today." And I said, "I am." And he says, why are you leaving us? I see you've got your leaving cert. Why were you working in the television shop? I said, well, I wanted to learn about electronics and do theory on work in electronics and television. And there and then I remember he says, well, if you stay, I'll give you a job in accounts, which would give you more money and all that.
But that wasn't going to appeal
I
to
didn't want to do
the
it.
technical side of your requirement.
So anyway, when I walked out, I kind of realised, well, maybe I did do the right thing in the end, because a couple of years later, GEC had gone belly up and Des was studying away.
You make these decisions in life and you have to move on from the two.
Yeah.
Was that the fact that Martin Naughton could actually... The fact that he knew you were leaving that day, was that the degree of control he had on with so many people?
Know. Maybe
did
they
he know
just
everything
looked at everybody, to see who was joining and who was leaving and why were they leaving. He just was interested to know why was I leaving. And maybe he was just trying to hold on to me somehow, or possibly just.
I imagine he might have been, Des. I imagine he might have been.
Well, I don't know, to be honest with you.
Well, he wouldn't make you an offer like that if he didn't think you were worth it. Now, be quite
well,
honest.
I think he was kind of surprised a chap with his leaving cert would be working in screwing chassis into the television set.
So overall, you'd say your time in the GEC was successful from your own professional point of view.
It certainly, yes, it did. It gave me a bit of a get up and go, and I wanted to study and get out and do exactly what I did. And in the end, I opened up my own business and been paying for it ever since.
No, you're doing very well. But let me ask you the question. If there was one thing in your infinite wisdom that you would say you would criticise about the place, something that might have made it better back in the day, what might that thing have been?
Well, that's very hard. I don't really know, Frank.
I have to ask you one hard question, Des.
That's a hard question. No, I'd have to
think about that.
I'll have to think about that one and maybe whisper it to you later on.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we?
No, not really. It's sad to see that so many people up there now are all gone to their eternal reward. You know, Pat Reynolds, and he was the main man up there at the time, and there was Eugene McCabe. There was loads of other people.
Unfortunately, that's what happens with life and stuff.
I know,
you know.
It's sad, but that's the way it goes. You know.
Anyway, all I can say is I'm not surprised at our little talk.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Des, do you ever get any of those old GEC TVs in for repair afterwards?
No. I'll tell you what happened to me. A friend of mine asked me once, could I get him a television set? And I went down to the GEC distribution place down below they were at the back of the Long Walk shopping centre there. They had a place in there. And I went in and I bought this man. His name is Joe Curley, actually, on the Avenue Road. I bought him a television set. I brought it down to his house. And when we plugged it in, it wouldn't work. And I had to drive the whole way up to the after sales department in GEC in Dunleer, and there was a chap there called Damien Reid and Damien Halfpenny were there at the time, and there was some problem in the television, and they sorted it, and I took it back and eventually got the television set to work. But that was the only one television set, GEC one, that I ever.
I hope your name wasn't the inside of that manufactured by.
Well, we used to have to put our initials on the little tags on the chassis, and you had to put your initial on the tag. I didn't check to see if my name was on that. I bet you didn't.
Just let me ask you one question there. You said Joe Curley. Was that Joe the pianist by any chance? Did he play the piano?
Joe played the piano and played the trumpet in the Dundalk Brass Band.
Yeah, he was very good actually.
And Joe was the purchasing officer up in Commercial Road Vehicles, up beside where I used to live on the Ardee Road. And I got to know Joe very, very well through my dad.
Yeah.
And he was a great trumpet player and piano player. And I did a couple of shows with Joe playing the drums.
You played the drums then?
Oh, I did indeed.
Yeah.
And we did a couple of Knockbridge Musical Society shows together. And we great crack.
Good. And deviating from our programme content, which is okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember Paz in the Paz restaurant? Richard Mackin had it in.
Richard Mackin had, before Richard had it, it was George O'Shea, I think.
Was it? Well, the reason I bring that up is that I remember going out with my wife on nights after we got married or whatever years were, and Joe would be playing the piano.
Joe was playing there. I wasn't aware of that now that Joe played in Paz, but I know Pat Grant across the road, Desi Dunn's son, or Pat Dunn, I should say.
Pat Dunn, yeah.
He played the piano up there quite regular.
Good venue.
Pat was a great pianist as well, but Joe was a good pianist.
Oh, he was, absolutely, On a night like that, he could, as I say, we're deviating here, but on a night like that, he could bring great entertainment to the people coming in. It was relaxing, you know.
Yeah, he was. He could
Did you always play the drums in key? Or were you out of key?
Well, maybe out of time a couple of times.
All I can say is thanks very much. I have to say, I truly enjoy that, and I know our listeners will just love what you say and the authenticity of what you're saying and the humour behind it.
Thanks very much for having me.
No, it's a pleasure.
Frank, just to clarify on some of the people that used to work in the TV shop in Dunleer. Of course, we had Pat Reynolds, and he was the main man in charge of the whole operation. And another man that was taken in to look after colour was Eugene McCabe, who became a great friend of mine later on and lectured in the Regional College in Dundalk. Of course, Arthur Kinahan was the shop supervisor, and then on the fault-finding technicians and fault-find engineers we had Kevin Carey, Paddy O'Hagan, Frank Byrne, Pat Crilly and Noel Bulger. Then on the initial picture test, when the chassis was assembled and the first time it was turned on, we had two other men called Stephen McLean and James Murphy, as far as I remember. They were on the initial picture test. And then on final picture test, when the television was ready to be tested fully, It was called the Final Picture Test. It was Seamus Leach and Jerry Burke. Now, when the fault finders found components that were possibly installed wrong, there was a lady who used to work right beside me at the time. Her name was Pam Yore, and it was her job to desolder the components and refit the proper ones back in so as the faults would clear. Beside the TV shop, there was the assembly of fluorescent light fittings as well. Now, I don't know that much about them, but I remember them being assembled in line with the TV shop, a couple of rows away from where the TVs were actually assembled. But there was a different setup and run by a different man. I can't remember his name.
And that was Des O'Loughlin, Audiocom Park Street, Dundalk, in conversation with Frank O'Callaghan. Coming up in part 11, Frank Byrne and Damien Halpenny look back at the history of Reynolds Electronics, from the assembly of Joy transistor radios in Bachelor's Walk to the manufacturing and modifications of radios and televisions and the research and development facilities at the Finnabar Industrial Estate premises. The series, Dundalk's Radio and Television People, was researched and presented by Frank O'Callaghan and recorded and edited by Alan Byrne.